Hey, Jonah.
Hey Butch, how's it going? Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
I'm just hanging in my studio, so it's all good for me.
Well, yeah, so this will mostly be about the 5 billion in diamonds. As far as like the musical approach from your end, I mean, how do you sort of describe this project, maybe like in the arc of your kind of musical career?
Well, it's a collaboration. I'm a producer and a musician. Andy Jenks is a producer and musician. James Grillo is not a musician. He's a DJ, but he's got 20,000 pieces of vinyl and about 15,000 CDs, and he's very opinionated. And really, a producer is someone with an opinion, and hopefully that artist trusts. So in some ways, once Sandy and I start coming up with music bits, we let James sort of steer us in certain directions. And again, he'll play a sample or an old record and go, really like the way that sounds, or maybe we should sort of go for this kind of reference. And it's a good working process. And what we try to do then is also give the musicians a lot of leeway. Usually the tracks when Andy and I start them are pretty bare bones. So I think that artists who we are collaborating with really like working with us because it's a pretty wide open palette, and I think they're all able to put their own stamp on it. So, and then I mix everything. So when that's one of the trickier things is just to try and get it all so there's a little bit of a cohesiveness, because each song kind of has a slightly different vibe. And I was conscious when I mixed the record that there was some continuity to it, just in terms of where the vocals were sitting, or sort of the space and the keyboards and things. But that's one of the challenges of doing a record like this, where it's a lot of collaborating because you have a lot of different colors and palettes on each song.
I know you just released Weight of the World. How would you sort of describe that song? Do you have any sort of connection with that or anything that kind of pops out to you about that song specifically?
It's meant to be sort of a celebratory acknowledgement of how fucked up everything is. And we wrote it last year, but 2020 has been one fucked up year, man. So in some ways, it's kind of a very appropriate song of the moment we live in, but it is very much acknowledging that and celebrating it. And I saw something this morning, Jonah. A friend of mine saw a news blip. I don't know if it was either CNN or whatever. The weight of the world with a photo of Biden and Trump, but then they tagged on our song. So,
Wow.
so which was really cool. It's like, duh, why didn't we think of that?
Amazing. I mean, I guess it sounds to me like, would you say this project is kind of liberating for you in the sense that maybe you don't have to plan everything out as much and things kind of take off a little more organically? It feels like maybe there's less pressure to like nail everything down or something.
Yeah, in the sense that it's collaborative. Like, I'll start a song and let it go, and then I'll send it to Andy, and he'll get some of the guys in Bristol, and then I won't hear anything for 3 or 4 weeks. I'll get it back, and it's completely different, and it's always good. I'm like, that's so cool. I never would have thought about that, and it is very much a labor of love. James and Andy are really good friends of mine. When we started this, we had no expectations to try and get on top 40 radio or anything. It's a cool band because I love collaborating with people, and all the musicians involved are really awesome. We have a rule that there's no vibe crushers.
Yeah, that's a good role for sure. I know you guys did a record in 2017. I mean, had you always planned to do a follow-up to it? Do you think you'll do another one? I mean, I know sometimes these projects can be one-offs. I'm sure you're super busy.
I think there probably will be another record. I think this process will have a little bit longer duration this time around. I mean, part of it's COVID because we were hoping to do some shows this year, and that's all been pushed back to God knows when, maybe at the end of next year. But I'm also, we're all in other projects. I have a garbage record we just finished, and we're probably going to be going out and touring next fall. So I hope we can play live someday. There's probably going to be like 12 of us on stage if we ever perform, but there's strength in numbers.
Yes, yes, that is true. I mean, speaking of the garbage record, I know you just finished it. Is there anything you can say about that? What people might expect? What it sounds like? Anything to kind of as a preview?
Well, the record is pretty dark, and each song kind of has its own vibe. I sort of feel like it's a mutant cousin to our third album, Beautiful Garbage, which also had a similar thing. Each song kind of was its own entity. Um, Funny enough, Shirley wrote the lyrics. She wrote them all before COVID kicked in. A lot of the lyrics are very reflective of the time that we live in. And so I think the record is kind of dark and edgy. Parts of it are really beautiful. There's some references, a couple song references to Talking Heads. There's a couple to Roxy music. There's a couple that are quite abstract sounding, almost fractured sounding. Um, so I think the album is quite eclectic, but it still sounds like us.
Got it. I was sort of curious to get your thoughts on maybe the state of rock music. Having produced all these iconic records, what do you sort of think? I feel like you always just hear stuff like guitar music's out, like this, like what do you sort of, what are your thoughts, I guess?
Every year somebody says either rock is dead or the next week I'll hear rock's making a comeback. It depends on if they've just heard a cool new band, right? The thing is, rock music is not really getting played on top 40 radio. So in the mainstream, a lot of people think, well, it's dead or it's gone or it's missing. But rock bands are still there's so many cool bands out there making a great noise and writing great songs. And there's always going to be music fans who want to hear loud guitars and lyrics with attitude. That's whether it's a punk rock attitude or it's a rebellious attitude or just a really intense heartfelt emotion. And so it's not rock is not dead. It's never been dead, and it doesn't need to make a comeback because it's still there. But I can't see it breaking into mainstream radio anytime soon. I mean, Nirvana, when they went number one, no one saw that coming. No one saw that coming, but they just wrote a perfect record for that time. It was a zeitgeist moment, and it could happen again. I don't see anything on the near horizon like that, but there's still a lot of kick-ass bands out there. They're just flying under the mainstream.
I'm sure you're tired of being asked about Nirvana all the time, but I was curious, coming up on 30 years of Nevermind, I mean, how do you sort of look back on that record after 30 years? What is it sort of, does it still feel vibrant to you? I guess, how does that experience sort of feel now, having this much time passed?
Well, it's funny when Garbage happened, I sort of had to distance myself from Nirvana a little bit because we would sit down and do an interview, and I could tell a journalist they didn't really want to talk about Garbage. They wanted to talk to me about Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. Luckily, after the first record, Garbage had a really successful run and Shirley became very much an icon. So then people no longer wanted to talk to me. But it wasn't really until I was doing Wasting Light with the Foo Fighters and Chris Novoselic came down and played on one of the tracks. And we had a great recording session, but we hung out and talked all night about recording some of the experiences of making Nevermind. That was leading up to an anniversary, and it was the first time that the three of us together started doing press. And I think we've all acknowledged that it completely changed our lives for the better. It's just allowed me to sort of pick and choose my projects. None of us saw it coming, so I'm really lucky to have been on that ride. But I think the record still sounds very fresh and passionate. It's the songs are super hooky. The band is playing in peak form, and the production. They kind of had to diss me after the success of the record because you can't be a punk rocker and say, "Hey, we're so happy we sold 10 million records," But I know when we finished that record, the band loved it. Kurt loved the way it sounded, and so it was nice, 20 years later for us to sit down and talk about how great that experience was. And as I said, I think the record still sounds really good.
Yeah, and I think so too. And I think it's, yeah, I'm sure for your production career, that must have been, I mean, I feel like you've gone on to produce so many iconic records. I mean, that really transcend genres. I mean, like from Jimmy World to AFI to more of the Seattle stuff. I mean, is there something you look for in a project that you saw with Nirvana or with any of these bands, or is it kind of more of an intangible thing?
Some of it is intangible. A lot of times I just want to know what the songs are like, if I think they have a good collection of songs. And then whoever it is as an artist, I try to make sure I understand what their vision is because I don't want to steer them into some direction that they're not supposed to be. So whether it's working with Nirvana or the Pumpkins or Green Day or Against Me, they all have a certain aesthetic that I want to make sure that they get to what they're trying to say at the moment, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that totally does. How do you generally find new music? Just through searching online or recommendations, or it just depends?
I sort of put my tentacles out there in multiple places to hear new music. But I do listen to a lot of new music. I don't want to just sort of regress and just listen to stuff in the past. I mean, I listen to a lot of old records too, but I listen to more new music than old stuff. And I'm always listening for a good song and also for a great artist, but also production ideas. I'll hear something and go, God, I love the way they made the drum sound in that, and I'll click in my head, go, maybe I could try that on something. I don't know, maybe on a garbage song, whatever. So um, I need to do that just to sort of keep my perspective fresh, I think, is just listening to a lot of new music.
Have you always been that way? Because I feel like it can be so easy to get kind of cynical, especially about new music when you've been involved in the industry for so long.
Well, the thing about new artists is I think they have a lot of great ideas, and the production is all over the place. People borrowing genres from punk rock and hip hop and electro and mashing them all together. And a lot of it is, to me, is a very DIY sensibility, and that's a doable now because people can make it on their computers, on your laptop or in your Pro Tools or Logic or whatever you're using. And there's no rules anymore. There used to be sort of a hierarchy in terms of how you got signed and got a manager and got a record out. But now you can record a kid can record a song on his laptop on a Sunday night and post it, and it could go viral, and a million people can hear it in 24 hours. And that's super cool. That did not happen 20 years ago. So that's empowering everyone. And so I think that's why there's so much cool, interesting music out there, because it's just a wide open canvas, and a lot of young artists are taking advantage of that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, yeah, thanks so much for doing this, Butch. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, cool. Cool, man. Well, be safe. The country's been so divisive this year, and COVID has not helped that.
Right, I
So
agree.
I'm hoping that we can heal a little bit post this election.
Yeah, me too. Right on. All right, well, send some good vibes out there, and yeah, we'll talk to you later on.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Jonah.